Welcome into a Friday edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Happy Friday, hockey fans. Tyler Yaremchuk and Frank Seravalli with you as we are Monday through Friday here on the show. And as always, it's brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family's safety is important. That's why Fountain Tire treats your vehicle like it's their vehicle. Whether it's new tires, whether it's fixing something up with your engine, Fountain Tire can sort you out. And right now, they'll save you some money, up to $225 off on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, until December 14th, plus an extra $50 or more on any service of $150. Some restrictions apply. Stop into Fountain Tire today. Frank, happy Friday, coming to us live from Boston.
Yeah, they let us get to Friday again. Let's go.
Indeed. They call Boston Beantown, by the way.
Yes, that is accurate. Yes.
We have a lot to get to today on the show. A new edition of Icebreakers coming up. Frank has maybe some nuggets of info on teams looking to get into the trade market. But the big theme of today's show, Frank, it's the title. It is projecting the rosters for the Four Nations Face-Off. It is crazy to think we are only a month away from these bad boys needing to be set.
Yeah, 1 month from Saturday, December 2nd is the deadline. And, you know, it's interesting because you kind of think about all the preparation that goes into this. GMs have been quite literally crisscrossing the continent, scouting these players. But when you really boil it down, and we'll get into it right now, it's really not that complicated. Like, essentially what we're talking about is kind of nibbling around the edges for 5 to 7 spots in terms of who you think the best fits are, because by and large, these are like, there's a lot of no doubt candidates, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And that's what I thought going through these rosters last night when you sent them over. We put 4 of our best writers on the case. Matt Larkin did Canada. Steven Ellis did Finland. Our pal Uffe Bodin handled Sweden. And then you handled Team USA, Frank. But let's kick things off with Canada's projected roster from Matt Larkin. The one surprise, even though he's up in the top 6 for me, was seeing Alexis Lafreniere there. I do think that trio does actually make a bit of sense, but that was the surprise for me. I know Larkin had his sort of last cut or toughest cut on this forward group as Quinton Byfield. For me, it might have been someone like Carter Verhaeghe, because again, you're trying to build a forward group that has a good balance, and I think Verhaeghe would give some jam. So that was my one qualm, if you want to call it that, but I largely do, again, think this forward group has a lot of quote unquote locks on it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the guys in yellow that you see here have already been selected to the team, so they're already locked in. And Lafreniere is definitely the guy that stands out because, you know, you look at the success that he's had this season and stretching back to the playoffs last year where he really turned it on. He's been incredibly impressive, yet he still isn't even getting some of the big opportunities on his own team yet, to think that taking a step forward and making this Canada cut would be an even bigger thing on top of that. So to me, I think it's certainly worth the conversation. I love the bold projection that Matt Larkin has him on the roster. I'm not entirely convinced that that will be the case, because you mentioned Verhaeghe, and he to me stands out as the toughest cut, because this is a guy who's battle tested. He's done this in the Stanley Cup final in back-to-back years. He's been in big boy moments, and not to say that Lafreniere can't or won't get there, but it doesn't have to be this February in Montreal and Boston, as great a story as it would be. So I would tend to personally lean toward the experience that Verhaeghe has shown.
I think one of the more fun debate with this Canada forward group is saying who's going to play with who in your kind of dream hockey fan world. What duo or trio would you like to see together the most? I mean, Larkin has McDavid with McKinnon. That'd be excellent. I'm intrigued by just throwing together a line that's all the East Coast boys with Marchand, Crosby, and McKinnon. Bedard and McDavid is tantalizing as well. Which one would be the most fun for you to watch?
Yeah, even McDavid and Crosby on the same line. I know, like, the idea of separating them and kind of balancing out your power is amazing, but there's no doubt about it that Team Canada, and you can underline this 6 times, Team Canada has the 3 best players in the entire tournament on their team: Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and Cale Makar. So the rest of it will be about trying to kind of surround Canada with the right chemistry and fit. And that's always what it comes down to when you have an embarrassment of riches to pick from.
There's one area, though, Frank, where they do not have an embarrassment of riches. I'll go through this in order for a second, though, but the blue line looks solid. I know the one tough decision Larkin said he had to make was including Mackenzie Weegar over someone like a Josh Morrissey, but right below that blue line is that goaltending, and it is, after going through it, undoubtedly the weakest in the tournament.
Yeah, and that's going to be what sticks out for Canada like a sore thumb unless they can outscore it and outrun it, which is entirely possible given the forward group that they have. The one thing that I question about this defense core as it's currently assembled would be, and this is the big thing that a lot of these teams are going to have to talk about, Cale Makar and then Evan Bouchard are going to dominate probably the power play opportunities for this team on the back end. So the big question then is, if you're not playing on the power play, what are you bringing to the table as a defenseman that will differentiate you from everyone else? Alex Pietrangelo is a really well-rounded player. Makes sense. But when it comes to Shea Theodore and Mackenzie Weegar, I don't know that you need two guys that really sort of think offensively like that. I'd want a more stout defender in the mix. I don't care about getting 50 to 70 points in an NHL regular season. I care about keeping pucks out of our net and supporting and buoying our goaltending, which obviously is the weakest link of the team. So I think there probably needs to be some more curated selections here, not knocking Matt's at all. They're probably consensus. I wonder if Canada maybe goes in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, I do agree with you in the sense of like, okay, Makar and Bouchard is your kind of power play specialist. You even need them both. It is worth noting Cale Makar kills a lot of penalties, though. I think you
Yes.
can look at this and go, Bouchard's your power play guy. Like, as much as Cale Makar has all the skill in the world, him and Taves are actually a good PK duo.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it is like another point that talking to some people involved in the selection process have made is some of the best players in these teams that have been picked are not just power play guys, they also contribute on the penalty kill, to your point. So I think a guy that stands out to me, Morrissey, is one. I'd also be looking at someone like Dougie Hamilton too.
Yeah, that's an interesting name. Again, still a month to go till these teams are named. But Canada's blue line's interesting. The goaltending is a big question mark. The forward group is just absolutely dynamite. And as we move to our next team, Team Finland, it's actually kind of the opposite for Team Finland. I look at this forward group to start and I go, whoa, there is not a lot of depth here, Frank. And even when I looked at who Steven Ellis kind of had to leave out in some of his tough decisions, it was like, okay, again, these are all very good players. And you look at that right side and you go, yes, they are all good. And the left side, yeah, they're all top 6, top 9 guys, but it's not full of stars the way a Canada is. I view this forward group, even though I love that depth down the middle, the depth on the wings is the big question mark here.
Yeah, and look, there's other question marks in terms of health too. Will Patrick Laine be fully healthy and ready by the tournament starting? What does he have in the tank? Where will his game be? I think there's some interesting fits in terms of what kind of combinations you might be able to put together. I think this Finnish team, although they're lacking in talent compared to all three other teams, they're going to be really difficult to play against. Arturi Lehkonen is a really well-rounded player. Alexander Barkov, probably the smartest player in the tournament. And, Michael Granlund, for instance, like these are guys that have been tested. Rupe Hintz, same thing. And they've passed the test time after time. So they're definitely, I think it's fair to underline this part as well. Finland is probably top to bottom the least quote unquote talented team that's picked in this tournament.
Yeah, and we got a comment from D. Ely says, yeah, but this lineup is more all-round players. And I don't know if I really agree with that. Like, do you look at Laine and Kakko as guys who go, oh, yeah, those are well-rounded bottom 6 guys? Like, I just don't know if I quite agree with that.
No, but like an Anton Lundell is a nice flex on your fourth line.
Yeah,
if that's what it ended up being.
The blue line for Team Finland is, again, very good on the top end of things. I love Miro Heiskanen, but it is, again, fair, I think, to argue that the depth falls off. But where they are going to recover from this is between the pipes. UC Saros has that game-breaking ability.
He does. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, though. I think this defense core really gets thin in a hurry. Henry Jokiharju, you see what Oli Mata was just traded for. He's basically a third pair NHL defenseman right now. Third pair NHL defensemen aren't coming close to sniffing the rosters for Team Canada or the US. So it's a bit of a different beast for Finland. And I would say the way that this team stacks up relative to competitive cycle as these things kind of go up and down, it's probably going to be a downturn of a couple years for Finland in terms of their competition in both the Four Nations and the Olympics. Doesn't mean they're going to be an easy out. It just means that, again, this Rasmus Ristolainen, his game's fallen off in a big way. So to me, I think there's just a bunch of question marks, but well suited in net.
Yeah, and again, that could end up being the difference. Like this tournament will come down to single games, and if UC Saros is standing on his head, and let's say they go up against Canada, and Canada's goaltending is a problem, then it's 5-3 Finland, and we're sitting here going, boy, we shouldn't have underestimated the Finns. But goaltending has the ability to change things. As we go from Finland to Sweden, and shout out once again to Uffe Bodin for throwing this together for us, Frank. Let's just keep going in kind of the same order through these teams. Their forward group, I like it more than Finland's, but I think the one player I'd maybe argue with on here when we move to the depth conversation is maybe someone like a Nils Höglander. I know Uffe had Michael Backlund as his last cut. I look at this and I'm like, okay, maybe adding one more good PK guy to that bottom six and a guy who can be a leader in Backlund is the smart move. I'm not sure if Höglander is a good bottom six guy in this kind of a tournament, but again, similar to Finland, like I love the high end of this Sweden team.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to think, and Uffe does a fantastic job, and his points are all well made. I'd be hard pressed to think, as good as Höglander has been a nice surprise. I don't know that you're leaving Michael Backlund off this team, for instance. And I do love the pick to go with someone like Leo Carlsson, because I think he's really beginning to knock on the door of becoming a really complete player in the NHL. I think he has, I think he's the Swedish version of Patrice Bergeron. I know that's a lofty projection, but I think he can get to that level in the NHL. Is he there yet or close to it? Not at all. But this is one of those maybe step up experiences that's going to be really interesting. And yeah, I think this is the one thing that stands out. If for Finland, to me, was the grind factor that they have, for Sweden, it's the brain factor. They've got some elite thinkers on this team that can think their way around the ice.
Yeah, and another reason, sorry, I wanted to make this point on the Backlund thing. I would want another good veteran center because, listen, we talked about it yesterday. Who knows how much you'll be able to trust Elias Pettersson in this tournament. I think that's one of those guys that, hey, if he's playing great hockey in the month leading up, then you really view this Sweden forward group a lot different than if he's in a slump like he is right now. The blue line is the crown jewel, if you want to call it, of this Sweden team. I mean, look at this. Hedman, Karlsson, Dahlin, Forsling, Ekholm, Anderson, Lindholm. You want to talk about the perfect blend of high-end skill while also being perfectly balanced. I think this Swedish blue line, I love USA's, we'll get to in a second, but I think this might have the chance to be the best in the tournament.
I don't know that I'd fight you if you said that, to be honest. I mean, it's really good. And so now think about some of the pieces that Uffe left off of his projection. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who's had a fantastic 18 months in the NHL. Adam Larsson as a true defensive defenseman. Philip Broberg has been a revelation in St. Louis. And Jonas Brodin. So to me, they're all really good options. I think he got this 7 right, as tough as that might be to leave off someone like an Ekman-Larsson. But there's a real blend here between offensive and defensive push that I think also a size factor too that really stands out.
Yeah, and the goaltending, again, not really much of a question here for Sweden. They have a good trio there. I think Markstrom, one of those guys, will step up and be a solid number one for you. So really no question marks in that regard. Let's get to the team you were tasked at handling, Frank. Team USA. For me, this is the only forward group that can rival Team Canada's. And honestly, with some of these guys, like I love a Matt Boldy, and you look through a few of these names in the bottom six, it's like, man, This one just rival Team Canada. Like, there's an argument to be made that it's just as good.
It's really good. They're going to score a lot. I don't think it's quite as good as Canada. I think the US has a clear advantage, I think, on defense top to bottom. And I also think, obviously, in net. So the matchup, like, it's already circled on my calendar. February 15th, 8 p.m. puck drop at Bell Center in Montreal on Saturday night, February 15th. Like, just take it and hook it right into my veins. This is as good as it gets. And really, the toughest part about going through this projection is, the age old debate that it comes to putting together a team. Are you looking for the best collection of players? Like, are you trying to build an all-star team, or are you trying to fill very specific roles with certain players? And that's why I love the flexibility that someone like a Vincent Trocheck has, or Dylan Larkin, or Chris Kreider. Like, Trocheck and Larkin could easily play the wing if required. They could definitely play center. JT Miller could play center. Like, you've got lots of different options in play here. You've got creativity, you've got goals. And it was hard to leave off some guys like Cole Caulfield, Brock Besser, Tage Thompson, Clayton Keller. Those are all fantastic players. Tage Thompson's like tops in the league in goals for per 60 this year at 5-on-5. Brock Besser has shot the lights out. Cole Caulfield's one of the league leaders in goals this year. All really worthy candidates. But they're going to have plenty of scoring already. So I think you probably needed to bring a different element. And Trocheck has a versatility. Kreider has a net front presence. Like Boldy, I'm always going to bet on guys that play for the team of the GM that's making these selections. You're not going to, if you can avoid it, leave your guys off. And Boldy has put himself squarely in the mix that I think Bill Guerin is going to find a way to get him there.
Pat, can you maybe flash up the board with the Team USA cuts on it? Because I do think, again, as Frank went through some of those names, like we talked about, the forward group a step below Canada's. If USA was to put together a B squad and Canada was to put together a B squad, I think USA is actually better, as crazy as that sounds coming out of my mouth. But you're right, a ton of talent left off here. And as we move to the blue line, Frank, Neil Pionk, we raved about him yesterday on the show. He did not make your roster. That is a testament to how good this blue line is. But I think he's one of those guys where if his play in November is as good as it was in October, he deserves to be on here. Take us through your process in putting together this blue line and your process with some of the cuts as well.
Well, that's the other thing that's kind of, I think, a fable of this selection process is that someone over these next 4 weeks is going to play their way onto the team. I think it's a way larger sample size and body of work. And to be swayed by one player, unless the wheels totally fall off of another, probably isn't going to happen. Like, the bar and threshold is really high. Like, if you notice, and not to single anyone out, I didn't even consider Seth Jones. Like, he's not on my radar for this because I don't think he's been good for a while. And so part of it is fit. The toughest one was the number 7 spot. I went with Brett Pesce over Zach Werenski. Part of it because of the selection process. As mentioned, Tom Fitzgerald is one of the assistant GMs. He has Pesce in New Jersey. Like, that probably means something. Werenski would be a totally fine candidate. Like, I think if you subbed Werenski, and I think he's probably even more well-rounded than Pesce, if you were to sub him in, I wouldn't bat an eye at that at all. But I think Brock Faber has been really good. Jake Sanderson is unbelievable. They've got a nice blend between offense and defense. And to the same point that I made earlier with Team Canada, like, Quinn Hughes and Adam Fox are probably going to get the lion's share of the power play time. What else are you bringing to the table that you can do for this team to help this team if you're not on the power play? Neil Pionk is a great sort of answer to that. He's not going to be playing power play for Team USA. Unbelievable skater. But what's his defense like? Is it as good as some of the other guys on this list? Is he as skilled? Is he as good? I would say right now, as awesome as he's been, 12 points so far to start the year, I don't know that he necessarily meets that threshold to differentiate himself.
You want to talk about differentiating the biggest difference between this roster and Canada's? And I mean, hey, Finland's got one elite goalie. Sweden, you could say, okay, they got two. Canada saying, boy, we'd love to have one. USA goes, we got three of them, maybe four, because Demko's cut.
Yeah, that's tough. I feel for Thatcher Demko, who's very unlikely to make this team given his injury situation. It's hard to inspire confidence, even though last year he was quite clearly at a Vezina level when he played with the Canucks last. But you got to be confident in your picks. And there's a stout group as it is: Hellebuck, Ottinger, Swayman. I mean, you could make the argument that, and I don't know if you'd win with Saros in the mix, but that Canada has, or sorry, the US has the best three goalies, period, in the tournament. Like 1, 2, 3, not like the totality of the trio, like 1, 2, and 3, they're all the best goalie in the tournament.
Well, yeah, because when you think about who the other elite goalies are, they're not playing in this tournament. There's no Shesterkin, there's no Vasilevsky, there's no Sorokin, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what stands out is the US is going to have that nice backbone to lean on. Their question is, can they match what Canada's forwards can do?
Man, it is tough to go through all of that and feel like you did a good job covering it in 20 minutes. If people want more, dailyfaceoff.com. You can read the full rosters. You can read every writer's explanation of who they had and who they left off the team as well, their strengths and weaknesses. Very well done. And it's up now on the site. We'll throw a link to that in the chat as well. But we are going to move along and get to today's edition of Icebreakers. Icebreakers, our weekly insider segment with Frank Seravalli, as we empty the notebook and we are starting out west in Vancouver. Listen, Frank, we love that Vancouver front office because it feels like every month, every 6 weeks, they're itching to make a big splash somewhere. They are known as the most active and aggressive when it comes to improving their roster. So what are Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin looking at now?
Yeah, so I do believe that Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford have been making calls to find out what the market looks like. However, I think for right now, they really are excited to see what the full complement of their roster looks like once Dakota Joshua and Derek Forbort are back. I'm told with Dakota Joshua, who's coming back off-season surgery, testicular cancer, and it's been obviously a tough few months for him. He's really close. I don't think Saturday is an option, but I think later next week is for Joshua to return to the lineup. So that's really important. And if the Canucks are going to go out and make a move, I believe that it would be for more efficient puck movers. That's been the one sort of eyeballed complaint to this point, has been their first pair is really good at getting out of their own end, but they struggle with the latter half of their defense. And they're going to need to turn that around. And that's definitely a focal point for the Canucks as they continue to look at the market.
Yeah, and it's a reason why pieces like Brandstrom and Juleson are getting into their top six over someone like Vinny Desharnais, who they gave 2 years, $2 million to. They're itching for puck moving. Next area I want to go to, out east. Yesterday, we showed that great video of Don Waddell cruising on his Green Lantern scooter, Frank. But he has been active not just on the scooter, but maybe on the phone lines as well. They've been one of the best stories in the league. What could Don Waddell be looking to get up to in his first season as GM?
Well, it's not going to be adding in the short term, which isn't a surprise to Blue Jackets fans. However, he has let teams know that he's interested in taking on contracts that may be viewed as undesirable in exchange for assets. They've got cap space. Everyone knows that it's use or lose. In fact, the number of teams that have cap space that are willing to take on contracts, that number has dwindled a bit. And also, we're in a year in which, with increased cap space, there probably won't be a need for third-party brokers when it comes to the trade deadline. Columbus is aware of that. They want to flex that and use their cap space to take on deals. It's just that to this point, the ones that have been floated to Don Waddell are guys that have 3 to 5 years left on their deal, which is fascinating to think about. Teams that have made long-term commitments that they're already unhappy with. You could go through cap wages or wherever you go to pinpoint who those guys might be. But Don Waddell's response has been, I'm not really interested in guys that long, because somewhere in that 3 to 5 year window, my team's going to be better and should be pushing for the playoffs. And I don't want to devote cap space to players that are already viewed as undesirable. So they're open, and there's also no urgency to do this because they're already above the salary cap floor. And so that's not going to be a concern moving forward.
You mentioned the cap space, third party broker, all that stuff. There are only 10 teams in the NHL who woke up this morning operating in LTIR, which means there are 22 that not only have cap space, but will be accruing it leading up until the trade deadline. Free agent signing Yanni Hakanpää for the Leafs hasn't played yet this season, Frank, but is reportedly close to making his season debut and his Leafs debut. But that is going to create a roster crunch in Toronto. How are they going to wiggle their way through this?
Yeah, that remains to be seen because Hakanpää and Connor Dewar both sent to the AHL Toronto Marlies today on LTIR conditioning loans. The rules for that are a little bit different. You get 6 days or 3 games maximum before you have to be essentially activated and put on the roster. So the Leafs want to see how Hakanpää gets through that. They're excited to add a guy who's a stout defender, a true defender in every sense of the word, to their lineup. But if you look at their lineup, they were able to clear the cap space required to activate him by virtue of the Timothy Liljegren trade, which is why that also happened then, because they had the Sharks on the line and interested. They wanted to complete that deal. So they've got the cap space, but they don't have the roster space. They're chock full at 23 players, the maximum right now. So when you look at their roster and you realize that the only player who's waiver exempt in that group is Matthew Nyes and he ain't going anywhere, that means the Leafs either need to waive players to make room for both, or they need to make a trade. So I said it before, Leaf fans continue to hate or whatever it might be, but Nick Robertson, excuse me. I don't know why I called him Mitch. Too many names in my head. I was looking at Mitch Marner. Nick Robertson, healthy scratch this week. He remains a candidate to be moved if the Leafs can find the right value in return for him, as he's been unable to be elevated in that Leafs lineup for any sustained period of time. So look for trade or waivers or something. Keep an eye on the Leafs, because something else is, the other shoe's got to drop once these guys, if they're healthy, get on the other end of this conditioning stint.
Yeah, again, currently, according to Puckpedia, 8 D-men on their rosters. When Hakanpää comes back, something's got to give here at some point in Toronto. Last one on the injury front as well. Macklin Celebrini plays his first game, scores his first goal, has a beautiful assist, and then hasn't played since. He's still out with that lower body injury. What's the latest on Celebrini?
Yeah, so he's still actually week to week. Returned to practice yesterday in San Jose. It would have been awesome to get the Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, 2 North Vancouver natives, to the 2 most recent first-round picks going head-to-head. We're 0 for 2 this season, which kind of sucks. 1 month into the year, and the next time they play isn't until March 13th. So feels forever away, but the news on Celebrini is that there's no rush here. They want to get through the weekend and see how he feels. A very best case scenario would be Macklin Celebrini is back late next week. So still another week to go, potentially longer than that. This has been a nagging hip injury that they want to make sure is in his rearview mirror before he comes back to play and create some of that magic that we saw 7 minutes into his first NHL game. They need it. Will Smith got on the board twice last night. His first 2 NHL goals. Great story, but Will Smith, Robin needs Batman back.
3 dubs in a row for the San Jose Sharks as they won another one last night, powered by Will Smith. There you go. Fantastic stuff. That'll do it for this week's edition of Icebreakers. Moving along to our daily face-off inbox question, hashtag AskDFO. Frank, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to show you what the odds board says in a second from Bet365 for the Four Nations face-off, but I want your power rankings for the Four Nations.
I would, because they've been the 900-pound gorilla, I would go Canada 1, US 2, Sweden 3, Finland 4.
Pat, flash it up. Did he nail it? Canada 1, USA 2, Sweden 3, Finland 4, 7-1. I do think Sweden plus 450 to win this whole thing is an interesting spot, but there's also a somewhat sizable gap between Canada and USA. And honestly, I think those two should be a little tighter. I know things like public money and things of that nature can affect these these odds, but I think Canada, USA, just with the goaltending alone, it's thin for number 1, as much as that pains me to say.
I view it as a total coin flip. I could see it going either way. And so I would actually suggest that in that case, given that there's so little on the line for Canada to win from an odds perspective, that if you were going to make a play, that the US would be it.
I agree. Let's move on to our daily bets brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. You can download the app today and use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. NATION, all caps. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I got 3 picks for tonight. I'll rattle through quick. I like a home team when it's this tight on the money line. Buffalo against the Islanders. The Islanders in the middle of a 3-game losing streak. Buffalo, yes, they're coming off a loss, but again, we talked about this yesterday. Ever since that global series, since coming to North America, I actually think the Sabres have started to wake up and play some good hockey. I like them at minus 115. I want to get spicy on a Friday with a little goal scorer parlay. Only 2 guys needed to find the back of the net to get this thing up to over 11-1. Alexis Lafreniere is off to a great start, but he's gone back-to-back games without a goal, and you know what? Dylan Cousins is just flat out due. Come on, the workhorse from Whitehorse. He's been mired in a slump. They got him on the wing now with Ryan McLeod, so they're mixing up the lines a little bit. And this is just a little bit of a coin toss. A little pay for the drinks on Friday night at 11-1. And my shot prop parlay, Giroux's hit this in 5 in a row. Gensel's hit this in 5 in a row as well. You play them together, it's plus 142. Gensel at 3, Giroux at 2+ shots on goal. So those are my 3 plays. Do you like my goal scorer one, Frank? A little Hail Mary throw heading into the weekend?
Hey, put it on the bar. Let's go.
2 guys to score, and you get it 11-1. Let's wrap up with some garbage time, Frank. This weekend is the final global series of the year. If you remember back, there was Germany, there was Czechia, and Dallas and Florida will wrap up with their series in Finland. Puck drop's actually only about 90 minutes away, and I do like that the teams, we talked about this on the DFO rundown yesterday, they were honoring the golden helmet tradition, which was neat to see.
Yeah, look, that's one of the, there's always like quirks and traditions of European hockey. The fact that the leading goal scorer on each team in the game wears a golden helmet so you can easily identify him from the crowd, that's awesome. And I love to see Sam Reinhart and I believe it's Rupe Hintz wearing those helmets. Pretty cool too for Hintz in Finland to do that.
Yeah, and you have a great story up at dailyfaceoff.com about Panthers GM Bill Zito and his unique connection to the country of Finland. People can go read that over on the site, the full 4 Nations preview. And of course, keep it locked on the starting goalies and the line combos as we head in to a busy weekend around the NHL. Frank, enjoy your trip to Boston, and we will chat with you again on Monday. Everybody in the YouTube chat, you were fantastic. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Enjoy the weekend of hockey, and we will be back Monday at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.